Hey everyone, I'm Danielle Byington, and in this video, we're going to be talking about Christina Rossetti. This video is specifically going to be focusing on her poem, her long poem, Goblin Market. I'm going to give you a little bit of biographical background information about her that pertains a little more to Goblin Market. In the other video about Christina Rossetti's work, that of In an Artist Studio, there will be some biographical information there as well. It will be slightly different, a little more streamlined to the background of that poem. So here we're starting at looking at the fact that she is part of the pre-Raphaelite scene. There will be a little more about that in the video for In an Artist Studio by her. One of the main things I want to point out from her biography is her volunteer work with what was called a Magdalene asylum, sometimes called a Magdalene laundry. So this was basically a shelter for ex-prostitutes. Now, it could be other women who are just like destitute, on hard times, single mothers, but largely it was known for the term that's often used in that era, the quote unquote fallen women. So she is volunteering in different ways with that asylum. Now, that really fuels a lot of the narrative that you see going on in Goblin Market with the two sisters, one sister, Lizzie, warning the other sister, Laura, not to partake of the fruit. This is wholly a cautionary tale about not giving in to temptation. So I have broken this down into a few sections and I have taken excerpts. What you see on these slides is not the poem in its entirety, so just be aware of that. I've just taken the parts that I want to use. So in the very first stanza, this is lines 1 through 31, you have the introduction of the Goblin Men for the first time. It tells us sort of like in a fairy tale kind of way, morning and evening, maids heard the goblins cry. So in the morning and the evening, this means it's at sunrise and at sunset. Now, it is specifically at sunset when Lizzie and Laura are having that experience with the Goblin Men. So it's it's a space, it's a time of in-betweenness. We are in between day and night in both of those places. So this is a sort of other, a liminal space where these little goblin creatures come out. And the goblins keep repeating, come by, come by, come by our orchard fruits. And they have this whole long catalog of all the fruits they are selling, and you go on to see as the narrative goes on that they're not just, it's not a farmer's market exactly. They're not just selling it for money. They want other things in exchange. Moving on, Lizzie, who will be our hero of the story. Lizzie warns Laura not to listen to the Goblin Men. She tells her what can happen if they do. You should not peep at Goblin Men. Lizzie covered up her eyes, covered close lest they should look. Laura reared her glossy head. Laura was very curious about this from the beginning and whispered like the restless brook, look, Lizzie, look, Lizzie, down the glen tramp little men. One hauls a basket, one bears a plate, one lugs a golden dish of many pounds weight. She's very fascinated about this, very curious, but you know how the expression goes that curiosity killed the cat. So Laura ends up staying, even though Lizzie goes on. Laura keeps making up excuses about why she doesn't want to leave, even though nighttime is approaching. This is sunset, and the Goblin Men are coming down into the valley. They're coming down where they are, where the two sisters had been, filling their pitchers at a brook. So um, you only get little snippets, but you need to imagine this landscape as a sort of pastoral setting. We're out in a rural setting, just at large fields. We have the brook, the little body of water where they're filling the pitchers, and it's apparently a ways back to their house. So Sweet Tooth Laura spoke in haste to the goblin men. Good folk, I have no coin to take were to purloin. I have no copper in my purse, I have no silver either, and all my gold is on the furze that shakes in windy weather above the rusty heather. You have much gold upon your head. They are talking about her hair. So they don't mind that she doesn't have money because they don't take money. And you see the same thing come up again when Lizzie goes to talk to the goblin men later. So they don't want the money. They answered all together, buy from us with a golden curl. So she clips a precious lock of her hair and gives that to them in exchange for all this fruit. So you've probably figured out by now, as it always goes in literature, there's some sort of symbolism happening, and this fruit isn't just fruit. Maybe it is some really incredible bougie fruit, like some Whole Foods, good fresh fruit. But this is a representation of, maybe in a more ambiguous way, temptation, because it's, it says Laura has a sweet tooth for this, so it's hard for her to look away from this. It's something that is very desirous. It could represent anything of the quote unquote forbidden. Remember that detail about Christina Rossetti I just told you in her biography, that she worked in the women's shelter with the quote unquote fallen women. So it wasn't just that maybe they were ex-prostitutes. They also, at this time in this era, the Victorian era, they are dealing with addiction, and not in the way that we would recognize it today, but to opium. And there are products, and since there are no regulations for this stuff, is like snake oil kinds of things. You have products, one of the most popular would have been laudanum, in which people could just buy over the counter, our expression over the counter, right? To take for pretty much anything, but it's an opiate. And so they're taking it in any sort of way that they don't feel good. So they are getting high off of this. And the addiction issue with that was very real. And so addiction is another one of the sort of metaphors running through here with the quote unquote fruit, the forbidden fruit even. So she pays with a lock of her hair. You can't actually buy anything with a lock of your hair, of course. This is symbolic of her selling her body for this product that she is so curious about and so tempted to try. And so then when she partakes of the fruit, she then sucked their fruit globes fair or red, sweeter than honey from the rock, stronger than man rejoicing wine, clearer than water flowed that juice. So this is like some holy grail fruit juice going on. It's juicy fruit that she's eating. But you also have this repetition of sucked. So she sucked their fruit globes, and then on down a few lines, she sucked and sucked and sucked the more fruits, which that unknown orchard bore. So you have a lot of sexual innuendo being portrayed here. It's not even really disguised that well, right? It's probably difficult at this point And especially later in the poem, when the very passionate kiss between the two sisters, it's probably difficult to read this without seeing some sort of tones of sexuality. But the reality is, when Christina Rossetti published this, and she's in her early 30s when this is published, this was published as a children's book. And you can see how it does work as a children's story. It's a morality tell. It's a warning. Don't do this. Here are the consequences if you do. It's about a sort of motif of not staying out after dark because all the bad people come out and they can run your life. So it does function well as a children's story, but there's an interesting part here where you have to ask, at what point is that innocence lost, where you could no longer read it without seeing the sexual tone? At what point in life is all your innocence gone, where you've heard so much about sexuality in the real world from media and such? Like, at what point does that happen to young kids where they could no longer read this poem or be read this poem without feeling uncomfortable about what's happening? So she partakes of the fruit. And then when she comes back, her sister Lizzie, who told her not to do this, Lizzie met her at the gate full of wise upbraiding. So she's scolding her sister, "Dear, you should not stay so late. Twilight is not good for maidens." A lot that you can read in between the lines there. Um, so now she is bringing up a story about another young woman, Jenny, who this has already happened to before. She says, "Do you not remember Jenny, how she met them, the goblin men, in the moonlight, took their gifts, both choice and many, ate their fruits and wore their flowers, plucked from bowers where summer ripens at all hours? But ever in the noon light she pined and pined away, sought them night and day, found them no more." So she's talking about withdrawal. If you are reading this in the symbolism, the vein of symbolism of addiction, so Jenny partook from the goblins, and then she pined and pined away. She sought it more and more, but she couldn't find anymore. And then it caused her to grow gray, then fell with the first snow, while to this day no grass will grow where she lies low. So at this young woman's grave, because she is so tainted by this promiscuous culture, Lizzie is saying that no grass grows on her grave. That is sort of an urban legend, folklore kind of thing, that if no grass grows on someone's grave, that they were a bad person in real life. So Lizzie says, "I planted daisies there a year ago." And when it says they never blow, that's just a different kind of English from a couple hundred years ago or so, meaning that they don't bloom. So we get the cautionary tale of Jenny. And now it's happening to Laura. Laura is experiencing her first symptoms of withdrawal. This is about addiction at this point. Early in the morning, when the first cock crowed his warning, neat like bees, as sweet and busy, Laura rose with Lizzie, fetched in honey, milked the cows. So she goes about doing the chores with Lizzie, but she's not all there. She has something else on her mind. Um, they fed their poultry, sat and sewed, talked as modest maidens should. Lizzie, with an open heart, remember, Lizzie is the one who did not partake. Laura is in an absent dream. She's not all there. She's like glazed over, because all she can think about, just like someone who's battling addiction, all she can think about is the next time that she can get her fix from the goblin men. Okay, now Laura realizes how bad this is. They are out in the glen in the evening again, and it's getting dark, and Laura is again wanting to stay because she's hoping she will hear the goblin man chanting, "Come by, come by." And instead she hears nothing. She doesn't see any signs of them. um, by the way, there is a note in your first slide for Goblin Market about the Goblin Men and their appearance. So that is something called zoomorphism. That should be, I believe, the last bullet point on that slide. What that means is we're applying animal-like attributes to something. It can be an inanimate object, but often you see it in kind of fairy tale type stories, and applied to living beings. So the opposite of that is anthropomorphism, and that means we are applying human-like characteristics to something that is not human. So you have a lot of that in, say, Disney movies. So it can be an animal or it can be something else. So like Olaf from Frozen, the talking snowman, that's anthropomorphism. It's a snowman and it has the human-like qualities of having empathy for the girls. But also he's talking. He can think about the past, present, and future. These are all human-like qualities. The little animal sidekicks in all the Disney movies that talk and follow along with the main characters, that's anthropomorphism. The opposite of that, when you have it like this, where it's the goblins and they're all described as having different kinds of animal features, that's usually a negative, that tends to be a negative thing. It's usually an antagonist that has these sorts of qualities. They are animal-like in their behavior. It describes them early on. One had a cat face, one a whisked tail, and then one paces like a rat, and one travels like a snail. So it's all cutesy nursery rhyme stuff, but these are inhuman beings. So Laura is waiting to see all those little goblin men coming down to the glen. She doesn't see them and she doesn't hear them, but Lizzie hears them. And that's when Laura realizes this is really bad. Laura turned cold as stone to find her sister heard that cry alone, that goblin cry, "Come buy our fruits, come buy." Must she then buy no more such dainty fruit? Must she no more such succulous pasture find? Gone deaf and blind, her tree of life drooped from the root. She said not one word in her heart's sore ache. So you have this really detailed description of her gnashing her teeth in the withdrawal. That's very realistic. Christina Rossetti probably saw things like that firsthand. Now, this is what Laura is going through now, and it goes on to even say later, before Lizzie goes back into the glen to try to find the goblin men, it says Laura's lips shrivel and her hair turns gray, like she is going to die. So now we are to the part where Lizzie is going to make the heroic effort to save her sister. So Lizzie decides to go find the goblin men, and it says, till Laura dwindling seemed knocking at death's door. Then Lizzie weighed no more, better and worse, put a silver penny in her purse. Remember, the goblin men don't take money. That's not the currency that they like. And so she goes at twilight and she began to listen and look. Okay, then this part is really disturbing. She goes and she finds the goblin men and she offers to pay them, and she holds out her apron for them to put fruit in it in return for her paying with the silver penny. But they don't want to do that. They say, no, you have to stay and eat the fruit with us. You can't take it anywhere else. And she refuses, and they become very angry. They're no longer the cute little like cat-faced goblin. It says it no longer purrs. They began to scratch their pates, no longer wagging, purring, but visibly demurring, grunting and snarling. One called her proud, cross-grained, uncivil. Their tones waxed loud, their looks were evil, lashing their tails. They trode and hustled her, elbowed and jostled her, clawed with their nails, barking, mewing, hissing, mocking, tore her gown and soiled her stocking. They pulled her hair out by the roots. So they got their payment of her hair by stealing it from her. They stamped upon her feet. They held her hands and squeezed their fruits against her mouth to make her eat. This parallels sexual assault. But in the end, there's a very important detail here. Even though this is happening to her and she endures it because she loves her sister so much that she wants to help Laura, they kicked and knocked her, mauled and mocked her. Lizzie uttered not a word, would not open lip from lip, lest they should cram a mouthful in. So she's laughing on the inside because she feels the juice syruped all over her face. So this was her plan. It's her backup plan, at least. She's still getting something. So she did not open lip to lip. So she did not actually partake of the fruit. That's why she doesn't go through the addiction and withdrawal phase like her sister did. But this juice from the fruits is all over her face and her mouth, where they tried to force her to consume it. And so she returns, and this is where you have the very passionate kiss between the two. She is able to go home, and she cried, Laura, up the garden. Did you miss me? Come and kiss me. Never mind my bruises. Hug me, kiss me, suck my juices. There you have the sexual language again. Squeezed from goblin fruits for you. Goblin pulp and goblin dew. Eat me, drink me, love me. And so it says Laura started from her chair, flung her arms up in the air, clutched her hair. Lizzie, Lizzie, have you tasted for my sake the fruit forbidden? Must your light like mine be hidden, your young life like mine be wasted, undone in mine undoing, and ruined in my ruin? She thinks the same thing is going to happen to her, but she clung about her sister, kissed and kissed and kissed her. And then, because she's getting just enough of the fruit and the juice that's on Lizzie's mouth, she's getting just enough of that to solve the addiction, to come down from the withdrawal and survive. This is just like addiction in real life. When people go to rehabs, it's not usually going to be, of course, the same substance that they are actually dealing with addiction to, but a something that substitutes that, so the body can detox, and so the patient doesn't, have seizures and such. So this is the exact same idea. This is like methadone clinic tactics. So it's taking a lighter version of something that was just too much. And so this saves Laura. After that, she's basically soaring with life again. This revives her. So in the end, in the very last section, this is sort of a happily ever after. They lived to tell the tale. Days, weeks, months, years afterwards, when both were wives with children of their own, their mother hearts beset with fears, their lives bound up in tender lives, Laura would call the little ones and tell them of her early prime, those pleasant days long of not returning time. Would talk about the haunted glen, the wicked, quaint fruit merchantmen, their fruits like honey to the throat, but poison in the blood. Men sell not such in any town. So she tells them, and she continues to spread that as a cautionary tale. So this is, you might also read this if you're still reading it as a representation of Christina Rossetti's experience of working with the ex-prostitutes or those that have been addicted to opium and such. She is using this as a cautionary tale to not go down that path. Okay, that is it for the Goblin Market video. Thank you.